This is episode 3 of Don't Be a Sucker. I am coming off of a back massage. I got a nice hot stones massage. Mick Jagger has some nice strong hands, I tell you that. That hot stones massage. Am I right, Tom?
I was probably like a grand total of like 10 people who got that joke.
And they're all over 50.
Yeah, excluding myself as well. That went right over my head. Probably much to the dismay of my father, who I've definitely heard him talk about Mick Jagger, but I don't really...
Keith Richards, you know Keith Richards?
I've definitely heard my dad talk about Keith Richards more than I've ever willingly asked for, without a doubt. Sorry to the listener if I seem a little bit out of it. I got a COVID and a flu vaccine yesterday, which I assume is got like the firmware update from Bill Gates. You know,
I just connected my phone to his vaccine hotspot.
Right, yeah.
5G.
No, I'm thinking, I don't know, I get a little bit of head cloudiness, so I think he's got to work that out in an upcoming patch, but I guess I'll just have to wait until that one hits the market.
Until next time.
Yeah, no, get vaccinated. Folks,
Get vaccinated.
genuinely, some good stuff.
Now, friends, these books are free. Paid for by real Americans who want others to know the truth. But I'm an American. Some of the things I see in this country of ours make my blood boil. What's going to become of us real Americans? Real Americans. Real Americans. Real Americans.
Remember that when you hear this kind of talk, somebody is going to get something out of it, and it isn't going to be you. So let's not be suckers.
We can go ahead and get into it now, I think.
Yeah, so this is episode 3.
Is it really? I thought it was...
It's already episode 3. Isn't time flying by when we're having fun?
It is.
Talking
3. I always forget about the episode 0, the weird
Episode
one.
0.
The weird one. So
Never
we are
forget
on number 3.
about episode 0. So this episode, we are going to start talking about World War II.
And a little bit before. This is commonly and historically referred to as the interwar period. A lot of what we're going to be talking about.
In between World War I and World War II.
Yes, that is correct. Yeah, World War I, World War II, wouldn't you know it, things did not get better post Treaty of Versailles.
And in fact, things have seemed to get a lot worse.
Yes. They, especially in these days, they were very bad. So we're going to be covering a broad range of topics. We're going to be talking about general aspects that fascist governments, like characteristics, they kind of have beholden to them. We're going to be talking about the rise of fascism in Italy.
Yes, we will.
Kind of the starting ground for that. And then Germany, at least as much as feels fresh.
I feel like most people know the broad strokes, but we're going to hit some important
and
little things.
And a World War II overview. Again, there's countless podcasts and movies and shows and
books
and songs, perhaps.
I feel like we're not the first people
maybe
covering
even
this.
dance routines that cover the events of World War II. Maybe a musical number here and there. Perhaps a slam poetry sesh.
I have
it's just kind of
books filled with slam poetry about World War II myself. So let's do a little overview of what we talked about the past couple episodes to kind of get let us know the waters that they were swimming in at the time, the temperature, the pH. So at this time, we're coming hot off of this growing nationalism, and it's turning more and more into this hyper nationalistic fever spreading across Europe, and especially in places like Germany and Italy after their reunifications.
Yeah, legacy of reunification efforts being producing a lot of I'd say revolutionary fervor, revolutionary potential without a doubt. And in particular, post World War I, Treaty of Versailles, feeling like they got really the short end of the stick. Again, I'm not really sure how Italy interpreted them as getting, like, I guess the deals that they got, it could have been better, but Germany, I can understand a little bit more. They got like racked with like the whole debt of war.
I mean,
Italy,
it's a nice little like,
not so much, you know.
it's like the mutilated victory thing is like it's just a contradictory phrase in and
Right.
of itself. I mean, how can you have a mutilated victory, right? I mean,
Well, I mean, I could kind of see like the phrasing. I think makes sense. It's kind of like if you go jousting and you win, but you can never use your right arm
okay,
ever again.
okay, I'll give you that one. So yeah, I mean, Germany and Italy didn't really feel like they get their, they didn't get their cut.
Right.
There's also this growing anti-Semitism. I mean, for obviously thousands of years, but coming fresh off of the protocols of the learned elders of Zion being spread around, and just more and more kind of anti-Semitic conspiracies.
There was definitely a lot more in Germany, I'd say, more than Italy. Italy definitely took on anti-Semitic laws as it got chummier with Germany, which we'll talk about
Right. Yeah.
in a bit. But yeah.
And then we're also swimming in the waters of just race science.
Yes.
Yes.
Early 20th century scientific racism, polygenism.
Right.
You
Eugenics,
Yes.
phrenology.
Yes.
And you have ideas of the Ubermensch popping up, which can be achieved through eugenics.
Mm-hmm.
You have the idea of social Darwinism and the might is right mindset. You have this idea of circulating elites that will be taken advantage of by people like Hitler and Mussolini. You have this kind of idea that you can mold society however you like, partially through syndicalism and mass strikes, but also through just mythical kind of domination ideas. Does that?
Yeah.
And you have this Spenglerian cultural life cycle idea that's popping up. So a lot of different things that are gonna set Germany and Italy up to be absolute monsters.
Yes.
And Italy, like we said, are coming off a mutilated victory, as it would be coined. Germany feels like they got stabbed in the back, and it lit a fire under both of those nations.
Mm-hmm.
And there was already an oil well sitting right underneath, filled with hate and anti-Semitic bullshit. And the fire got lit, and all that oil just went up in flames.
Right.
And so now Germany and Italy are looking to make their countries great again.
Yes.
And so I have a quote here from Hitler in his book Mein Kampf, chapter
Never heard
1,
of it.
page 10, paragraph 2. He says, German Austria must be restored to the great German motherland, and not indeed on any grounds of economic calculation whatsoever. No. Even if the unions were a matter of economic indifference, and even if it were to be disadvantageous from the economic standpoint, still it ought to take place. People of the same blood should be in the same Reich. The German people will have no right to engage in a colonial policy until they shall have brought all their children together in the one state. When the territory of the Reich embraces all the Germans and finds itself unable to assure them a livelihood, only then can the moral right arise. From the need of the people to acquire foreign territory, the plow is then the sword, and the tears of war will produce the daily bread for the generations to come.
So that's a good, nice little note to get us started.
To get us started on
us in.
on what is to come right now.
Yeah, it makes sense that he becomes like the almost comical villain throughout. I mean, that just sounds like very,
Yeah,
I don't know how you can hear that and then be like, oh, this is like a good guy.
Let's give this guy a
throw
shot.
my weight behind him.
Yeah.
Well, all right. So I think now is probably a pretty good time for us to talk about some more general, broad strokes.
Yeah.
Talking about fascism, just like some general aspects that we've been able to discern across the different movements. And this is just, something to kind of keep your eye and your ear perked to. If you ever see it routing in your own society, these are some broad things. So I just have them listed here. So in building the ideology, one thing that you tend to notice across Germany, especially, as well as Italy, is the idea of this ideal citizenry, the perfect person, the perfect national, as one could say. And in Germany, this is particularly stressed upon as the Übermensch, the Superman.
Yeah.
Not Superman. I mean, kind of like Superman,
Like Superman,
but
actually,
but not exactly like Superman. But
nice jawline,
right.
Big puffy muscles.
Puffy, I don't know if those are the right words I would describe for the muscles. Puffy is a little strange, but yeah, we definitely get where you're going for with that.
Do you?
I don't know. But yeah, so an idea, and so this ideal citizen, generally when they're propped up, this person is somebody that embodies the ideals of the nation. So in an increasingly fascist society, for example, like in Germany, these ideals that are important are like racial purity. So like, are you blonde? Are you like, you have like good head, like skull structure, you're tall, you're like
what
muscular.
shape is your nose?
Yeah. How like, what's like the tilt of your nose? Yeah. No, it's like very, very minute details, but this is generally like in a fascist society, or really in any society. I mean, here's the thing. An ideal citizenry is not exactly like an unheard of concept in any nation state, in any society. Like this for in the Soviet Union, for example, there was an ideal Soviet citizen. The difference there, though, is that ideal citizen was somebody that worked for the community. They did everything in favor of the community, like broadly, but they still took care of themselves, ate right, did all the good things. In a fascist society, I guess what I would say is that the ideal citizenry like existed to serve the state. The state did not exist to serve the people. It was in fact the inverse. Like
they would tell the people that,
right.
They would say, this is a state for the people,
right? Just
to kind of get people to do what's right for the state, and then they'd be like,
but in reality, you're a foot soldier for the state. You in every aspect you are serving to meet the ends of the fascist project. They give you the illusion of autonomy and freedom, and in the form of like expansion and living space. But you're ultimately serving the end goal of the fascist project, which is like a homogenized, quote unquote, racially pure society through just abject misery and suffering in order to get to that end. Did you have something you wanted to add before?
Ask not what your country can do for you.
Yes.
Ask what you can do for your country.
Yes. That, but like times 1,000.
But like, yeah.
That, but like on crack. Yeah. So, and I think to put that on its head, of course, if you have an ideal citizenry, you have to have an unideal citizenry, perhaps quote unquote undesirables, or I label it here in my notes broadly as just the fifth column.
And is that the Untermensch?
In the Nazi context, that would be what they would develop as the Untermensch, which I don't even think Nietzsche created. That was an
No, that-
entirely that was a post Nietzschean product. Was this idea that there is a inferior man? Because again, it's not a lot of it was his words. It was like his sister and her wife, her husband.
Her husband, yeah, who ran their Aryan colony in Paraguay.
Right, yeah, no, but so you have this fifth column, and it's funny. The fifth column, for those who don't know, it's this perceived enemy from within. The term fifth column actually came from the Spanish Civil War. Civil war fought between Republicans, leftist socialists within Spain, and nationalists, or this was like the rebellion. They were the rebels in this context, led by Francisco Franco, who was a fascist. He was unique. He definitely had a lot more weight from the Nazis thrown behind him in favor of him than the Soviets, for example. It was like this, almost like a proxy war, I guess you could say, pre-World War II, just like kind of testing out which ideology is gonna like kind of
gonna stick.
up and come, and
Throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing it sticks. Type of thing.
And the story goes that apparently there was a secret telegram sent to the Nazi regime by the fascists in Spain, in which they claimed that they had 4 columns surrounding the last remaining holdout for the Republicans, the city of Madrid. They had 4 military columns surrounding the city, and then a 5th column waiting to strike from within. So that's where that term generally comes from. Fifth column would be used to explain like the enemy within, not only within fascist societies in the United States. For like during World War II, there was concerns of fifth column elements because there was a lot of Nazi sympathizers within the States, for example. But generally, in a fascist society, the people in power use this fifth column as a justification for the stripping of rights and privileges, to kind of constantly subjugate these people. It creates this idea that this ideal citizenry somehow is both superior to this fifth column, to this inferior group of people, but they're constantly being besieged and attacked at every corner.
The enemy is both stronger than you and weaker than you at the same time.
Right.
It just a ridiculous dichotomy to just kind of keep people, scared of something, but at the same time have a lofty place above whoever they think is besieging them.
Right. And and then the other like huge aspect that I could discern is just kind of the role, particularly of like the bulk of the society being the working class. Because in order for a fascist project to, successfully come to fruition, it needs to have the weight of the working class thrown behind it. And generally, they latch on to something like that by making it seem like they're going to be getting a deal or things are going to be better under them as comparative to like, socialists or communists. We'll talk about it in a minute, but in Italy, for example, a lot of the landowners and capitalists and monarchists really liked the early fascist movements because they didn't like socialism or just regular unions.
A lot of times it's like just as simple as that.
Yes.
Or
And
just not liking
weirdly,
a social movement.
Right.
As a response to civil rights, a lot of fascist movements popped up as a response to that. It's as simple as being like, well, they're vying for rights. I don't like that. Or they, the workers are trying to rise up and get rid of the bourgeoisie. I don't like that.
Right.
So I'm going to just like throw all my yoke behind this other thing regardless.
Right. And it's a thing that you consistently see even in the modern day where the United States we'll see in a international like foreign policy context, a socialist movement trying to take off, and then a fascist element within that country not liking that, and so we give them a blank check for
Pretty much.
for arms
Yeah.
and all the like to you know. Sometimes they don't even do a good job of it. Sometimes they kind of just piss it away. But that's
Or then use it against us.
right. Yeah. The blowback theory.
Yeah, the whole blowback thing.
Yeah, it's crazy how it blows back, I gotta say. But yeah, it really, because essentially this class, I mean, they feel betrayed, like the working class in a very revolutionary context, like when things are really bad and there's a lot of upheaval, they feel betrayed by the government at hand. And so they can go one of two ways, either the socialist revolutionary path, which is a break from the economic system, in favor of more socialist, something more favorable towards the whole of society, but in an internationalist context. It's not like a nationalist, chauvinistic takeover. Or they could go the nationalist, chauvinistic, fascist route, which promises to give them, all of the little treasures and trinkets that they could under a successful capitalist boom. Which, I mean, and sometimes they boom, but then they bust.
But then they bust.
Yeah, and then it kind of
Boom bust cycle. Ever heard of it?
Yeah, it's weird how that happens. Did you have anything you wanted to add, Tom?
No,
on
I think
the
that's
general
that's good.
overview. Yeah,
I mean, of course, yeah. I mean, like we said at the end of last episode, I mean, fascism, when it's put in power, is kind of the ultimate just oh shit button.
right.
For capitalism, as a defense against social movements and like socialist uprisings and anything that's trying to really change the social norms and just the status quo is going to have a reactionary force trying to shut it down.
Right.
And fascists are really good reactionary forces.
Yeah.
And they're used that way.
Right.
So yeah.
All right. Yeah. So I think we can go ahead and talk about, of course, the starting ground for the fascist project. Of course, I'm talking about Italy. Italy. Now, I've got quite a few things I have written about it here. So if you ever just want to jump right in and add your 2 cents, but
Go for it.
So essentially, post World War I, Italy, as we had talked about earlier, they were looking to get some land from the Austro-Hungarian Empire. They did not as much as they wanted. They were still like kind of missing a couple little chunks here and there. They also
like Fiume. We talked about Fiume
Yes.
and Gabriele D'Annunzio.
yes, and how that would go on to influence a later event, which we'll talk about in just a moment here. But and Italy also lost out on a lot of colonial territories. They didn't really get a whole lot that they were hoping for from this victory in World War I, and the economy was just like taking a real downturn, and Italians, particularly capitalists and landowners and monarchists within Italy, are really, really concerned because of the revolution that just happened in Russia. So they're thinking these are some very volatile times. Society's in a great deal of upheaval. These communists could take over. There's a lot of socialist, anarchist movements and factions within the Italian peninsula at this time. And so the Italians kind of, they're not really sure like what's going to happen. You know what I mean? And then there's this guy, Benito Mussolini, comes into the picture. He of course was an editor for the socialist newspaper before he was banned from the party for taking a nationalist stance during World War I. He founded his own newspaper, And in that kind of got familiar with how to rile people up and kind of play sweet notes into their ears, you know. And he kind of becomes like a popular figure. You know, he's going around the Italian countryside, you know, making speeches, riling the people up. He's kind of a man of the people almost, or at least he really poises himself as such.
Yeah.
He's a former veteran, so he kind of posits himself as like the fellow trenchman. You know, I was down in them trenches just like you.
Right. Fighting for the great Italy.
Right. Fighting for, and how Italy got not really anything. So like, don't you feel so angry about that? Don't you care about the nation and not like what's going on in your life, but like the nation of the people?
Right.
You know? And that's really kind of the notes that he was playing to. So of course, being motivated by D'Annunzio's March on Fiume, there's the March on Rome.
The March on Rome.
Yes, which is it's a bloodless coup that happens. I think you were telling me a funny story actually about how Mussolini wasn't even really there for a lot of it.
I mean, he pretty much is on a train the whole time,
right?
While there's thousands of black-shirted World War I veterans and just a lot of people just rioting in the streets during the March on Rome. And Mussolini is in a boxcar on his way. Is it a boxcar? That's a train?
Yeah, probably.
He's in some boxcar, some cushy boxcar, just on his way in to Rome.
Getting some lunch.
And then just kind of shows up near the end and just at that point, you know, he just goes to the king, and the king is at that point kind of ready to just bring him in and hear him out. And he's just like, sorry for my attire. I was just out on the battlefield. And
like, yeah, bro.
Yeah,
like,
yeah, man.
Whatever you say.
All right.
Like, fucking get over yourself. Yeah, so it's a bloodless coup. Essentially, the king. So the king who unified Italy was Victor Emmanuel II. This is Victor Emmanuel III, which I believe is his son. I don't know if it's his grandson or his son. I don't know if there was another guy in between. You know how monarchs are.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is Victor Emmanuel III. He invites Mussolini to form a new government because, again, he's a king, he's a monarch, and he's like, well, this guy seems to really like the aspects of Italian society that include all of the conservative traditional shit. He seems to really
which is
like,
me.
right? Which is me, the king, and also the church and the pope and this and that. So versus the Bolsheviks who just murdered the Tsarist family, like, you know, a couple years prior, and
they're just godless devils.
Yeah,
I mean,
so he's like, I definitely have a much safer bet with the fascists than I do with the communists, which he is right.
He's right. Yeah,
as a king, he is correct in that assumption. So invites him to create a government together. And of course,
let's collab, right?
Yeah, the first
let's
collab.
make an app together, right?
Oh God. That's a good way of looking at it. It's like they actually just networked together.
They're just
creation of
networking, you know, kind of at the same event, and they're like, "Hey,
it's horrible. It's horrible. I don't want to think about that." So of course, what does a fascist entity do when it gets empowered? Of course, immediately starts to attack its opposition and make sure it's the only one that is allowed.
You have to consolidate power.
Right. And so they certainly did that. There was just, I'd say, so the March on Rome takes place in like what, 1922, I think? Yeah. So for a couple of years, as like the fascists are kind of rising in power, this is still in Italian society where there are non-fascist elements within the government. There are non-fascist elements that exist within, like there are unions, there are socialists, there are communists. Like these people still exist, and increasingly in this 2-year period leading up to the general election for the Chamber of Deputies in 1924, they are getting increasingly harassed, assaulted, sometimes killed by Italian fascists, either rank and file members of the fascist party, or just sympathizers to the fascist movement, people who are kind of groupies to Mussolini, I guess you could say. And this comes to a head particularly in 1924. Now, the general election had just happened in 1924, and this Italian socialist named Giacomo Matteotti, I think, Metteotti, goes up in front of the Chamber of Deputies and starts just lambasting Mussolini and the rest of the Chamber of Deputies, saying that the general election votes were fraudulent, that they weren't legitimate, that they should be that the election should be redone, because through laws that Mussolini had passed leading up to the general election, it artificially made it so that the fascist party would get the most representation, even though that is not what the share of votes indicated.
Weird.
Yeah, it's weird how that always seems to kind of go in that direction. And so, of course, what do you do when faced with any kind of opposition or being called out?
Either you blame them, like you flip it on them and accuse them of the same thing they're accusing you, right? That's a good one.
Mm-hmm.
Or executions.
He goes for the latter.
Deportations?
He goes for the Giacomo dies. He's assassinated, kidnapped by fascists,
and I'm sure Mussolini slept just fine that night.
He is murdered by Italian fascists, and then this is also this isn't like, I don't know. I feel like anytime people cover the rise of fascism in Europe, they always kind of pose it in this light that like they just kind of waltzed in and they weren't really met with much resistance. Mussolini himself, though, he had like multiple assassination attempts on his life, like 3 leading up to 1924.
That means you're doing something right.
Right.
Yeah.
Somebody trying to kill you more than 3 times. That's definitely like an indicative of like a good politician and not like a dickhead. So the combination of Giacomo being murdered, as well as these assassination attempts, Mussolini codifies into law the repression of leftists and anti-fascists. It's this difference between I don't know if I'm saying it right, de jure or de jure. It's like this
DiGiorno.
No.
Delivery. Not delivery. It's DiGiorno.
No. It's a Latin legal term. I think it's de jure because it's like a J in Latin. I don't know.
I'll believe you. Yeah,
versus de facto. So before they were just doing de facto state repression and terror, and now this is codified into law, like on the books, de jure. This is like okay.
This is
This is like legal and cool.
Yeah,
and this creates a lot of pushback from leftists. There's the Aventine Secession, which is very aptly named after the Aventine Secession in the Roman Republic, of the plebeians having a lot of discontent with the patricians. The leftist parties that existed in Italy, particularly the Socialist Party, the Communist Party, the People's Party, and the Liberal Party, all withdraw from the Chamber of Deputies as protest for the murder of Giacomo and for the codification of these laws. And then Mussolini just kind of like goes out there and says it when he is accused of murdering Giacomo. He says in a very famous speech in 1925, this is just a very short but probably the most quoted excerpt from it. He says, I assume I alone the political, moral, historical responsibility for everything that has happened. If sentences more or less maimed are enough to hang a man, out with the noose. So he's basically just saying, yeah, I did it. So what?
Sue me.
And there's more to come. essentially. Is
Yikes.
where he's coming at with this. So, of course, during this time, there's a lot like once he's consolidated power, the fascists like have total power within Italy at this point. Does a couple things to like try and make everybody like, like buddy. They love him, Il Duce, was that the leader or something?
Yeah.
Some Italian, whatever the fuck.
Something stupid.
Something stupid, I bet. So of course, they become chummy with the Pope. He sets out the Vatican as being like its own separate state, an entity, and he also sets Roman Catholicism as a state religion in Italy, which is like all of the very conservative Italians in the countryside, like they love that.
Oh,
they're
yeah.
just like, oh,
That's
man.
all they need to hear.
Right. They're like, this guy's it. You know what I'm saying? And he also, of course, he's through state corporatism, protecting corporations, and just basically pumping them with money and slamming down on any worker uprising along the way.
Which he does kind of through, like the nation kind of takes a hold of a lot of the mass unions, right?
Right.
It's kind of what is called national syndicalism.
Yes.
So the state just kind of like, all right, you can have unions, quote unquote, like per se, right? They kind of just like, but they totally kneecap the unions and just use it for the state and for the corporations, and just so they can more easily suppress workers.
They are neutered, without a doubt, in this time period. And as they're being neutered, of course, infrastructure and public works is developed throughout Italy. And internationally, capitalists in America see this and they're like, hey, maybe like it doesn't have to be either like regular old liberalism or Bolshevism. Maybe Mussolini's got something up. And this is where that myth that Mussolini made the trains run on time comes from. Really annoying, because again, it wasn't him. He's not running the fucking like.
It's probably the people working the trains who are making them.
It's the guys working the Italian rail company, not fucking that dickhead. But anyway, yeah. So in addition to the ideal citizenry, and the
fifth
column, the repression of leftists, of course, you have to have some kind of expansionism, and he gets a little bit inspired by hearing like Nazis talk about their own expansionism, Lebensraum. He takes his own Italian spin on it, called Spazio Vitale, which is living space in English. Sounds a little familiar.
Yeah,
it's not unintentional.
Yep.
Basically, at this point, we're talking like mid 30s. At this point, like 1934, 1935, Mussolini kind of has this envisioned ideal of Italy reliving its mythic past as the Roman Empire, I guess you could say. He had a lot of aspirations to completely control the Mediterranean, for example. He had a lot of interest in particular areas that hugged the Mediterranean. In particular, he really wanted to kind of hunker down in Southeastern Europe. So, former Yugoslavia, and just because again, at the time, that's the Kingdom of Yugoslavia, post World War I amalgamation of different nation states and whatnot together, as well as Libya, which is like it's an existing Italian colony, but it's been kind of forgotten to the wayside. So he wants to put a lot of attention into this, as well as, and this is not on the Mediterranean, but this was like a big focus and a big turning point in particularly the beginning of World War II, his efforts to hunker down in Ethiopia.
Right.
Now,
is this when Haile Selassie?
Haile
is in there?
Selassie is at this time he is the king or emperor, I guess you could say,
Which,
of
if
Ethiopia.
you don't know, Rastafarians often talk about Haile Selassie.
Yes.
Because of his efforts, his anti-colonial efforts in Ethiopia against Italians.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Rastafarian religion interprets Haile Selassie as being the second coming of
That is true.
of Christ. Like along the lines of like people see him in crowds and they see like the holes in his hands.
Or like he's on like the pancake I made this morning.
Right,
Like I saw
yeah.
Jesus on the
Yeah.
pancake.
I spilled a cup of water and I think I saw the outline of him in it. It's a divine miracle.
I always love that shit. It's so good.
But in Italy, in the Horn of Africa specifically, so Italy already had a couple colonies that like were along the coast. This is like modern day Somaliland and Eritrea. In pre-World War I, like Italian empire, nation state, getting a little piece of the pie. They very famously lost their first war to Ethiopia, though. Like
Ethiopia is hard to invade.
Yes.
They're one of the least colonized places in Africa.
It was one of the biggest holdouts. I would say a great deal due to its geography. It's very
mountainous.
Very mountainous.
Yeah.
It's supposedly where Homo sapiens originated from, the Ethiopian highlands.
That's us.
That is us.
Tom,
Yes.
No fucking way.
You and me. It's just got on that Richard Dawkins shit. you know?
Right?
We are all African. But and then the thumbnail should be a picture of Richard Dawkins wearing the shirt that says "We are all African."
No.
Can you pull that up?
Wait, this is a thing?
Look up Richard Dawkins.
Okay. If
We are
you're at
all-
home or in your car, please look up this Richard
Please look
Dawkins
up.
photo.
This is a classic. This is a certified hood classic right here. First one.
Oh my god, he's looking off into the distance like a freaking
First one. First one.
Oh,
that's-
this is and then there's this other picture here where it looks like he's taking a selfie.
I don't think that's him.
That's him.
I don't think is that him?
No, that's not him.
That's not him. That's some.
That's
like
Michael Shermer.
That's a different guy. Yeah.
Anyway,
Anyhow.
anywho,
So Italy very famously lost this first invasion of Ethiopia, and it was a huge blight on their permanent record, like they're in school or something. And so they're like, we're gonna fix this, And they, at this time, the existence of the League of Nations exists so that nation states can kind of hash it out before they come into blows with war. Mussolini does not give a fuck about the League of Nations and just was like, I'm just
the
gonna
League of
do
who?
it. Yeah, I'm just gonna do it anyway. They do some fucked up shit like total war, razing of villages and forests. They also use mustard gas throughout these campaigns and other chemical warfares that were made illegal.
Like ketchup gas,
Yes.
right? Famously,
Yeah. I maybe cut that one, but
mayonnaise gas, right,
These-
Tom?
No.
Tom?
if
Buddy?
you or a relative were a victim of Italian mustard gas in Ethiopia, I personally apologize on behalf of Tom.
I
and
also
myself.
apologize on the behalf of myself.
I'll play it.
I can't stop myself from condiment related jokes, Tom. What am I supposed to
They should
do?
have come up with a different name. Mustard gas was definitely.
That's a softball throw up. What am I gonna do? I gotta hit a home run. I gotta hit a dinger, Tom.
So Italy invades Ethiopia and a total invasion, and the League of Nations condemns it. And the only country that doesn't really give a fuck is Germany. They because they're just like, they're just kind of doing their thing, And so Italy recognizes this and they're like, they're kind of like twinning them. You know what I mean? They're kind of like chill with us,
Twins.
Yeah, twins, bro. And It's funny when Mussolini first got to know Hitler, he kind of thought he was like a hick, like a country bumpkin, like a nobody.
He was probably
Like-
wondering why he was walking around with a whip all the time, just like showing off his whip and wearing Lederhausen.
Well, apparently he like had like this very old Italian chauvinism to the point where it's like, 2,000 years ago, I would be like a highly sought after Roman, and Adolf Hitler coming from Germany would be like a lowly Gaul or something.
So
And it's
Mussolini
like-
would be like the quarterback on like the varsity football team,
Yeah.
basically.
Yes.
And then Hitler's like,
the water boy.
he's like he plays euphonium in the band,
Yes.
in the
yes.
marching band.
Yes, and it's but they warm up to each other. Initially, Italy doesn't really have a whole lot of codified racial and anti-Semitic laws, but as they get closer and closer to Nazi Germany, they're like, you know what, twinning them.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute.
Yes, and just to kind of we'll get to that with the discussion of World War II. So that's kind of the rise of fascism in Italy. Unless you had anything to add, I kind of wanted to turn it over to you, Tom,
No?
to cover
That was good.
a good bit of what you know about the rise of Nazism in Germany.
Oh yeah. So essentially the Nazis, right? They are coming off of World War I, got stabbed in the back. They were left with the bill, punched in the face, keys taken, phone taken. They wake up,
Shirts
$10,000
backwards,
shirts backwards,
inside out and backwards.
Yeah, and
Shoes are off. They just don't know where they are.
And
Whole
so,
nine.
I mean, you probably know a bit more about like just the overall political climate. I know there was a lot of socialist and communist movements going on at the time, and they did have their seats in the Reichstag, right?
Yes.
And that eventually gotten taken away, and we'll talk about that. But there was a whole German socialist movement with Rosa Luxemburg essentially at the helm.
Yes, the failed, unfortunately, German Revolution of 1918 to 1919.
Which kind of the Soviet Union was really banking on.
They were definitely, well, because they were preoccupied themselves. They were dealing with their own civil war. But they were like, they saw this, and from that Lenin quote that I had read in the previous episode or two ago, I forget exactly how many ago it was. They were really like, they were expecting that to kind of be like the steamrolling effect. Like it would waft across Russia and then into Germany and then ideally into other parts of Europe like France, the UK, etc. But unfortunately, that revolution does not come to fruition.
No.
Particularly the Social Democrats within the Weimar Republic, Germany, did not really like the aspect of total Bolshevik restructuring of government.
They did not.
And very famously betrayed a very famous socialist, Rosa Luxemburg,
Right.
by sending the Freikorps to assassinate her in a very brutal fashion, as well as
and that was in 1919. She
yes.
gets assassinated.
yes, as well as Kautsky.
Well, does he get assassinated?
I believe he was
Yeah.
killed in the. I could look it up, but yeah, I believe he was killed in the Freikorps raid.
Yeah,
along with
so-
Rosa Luxemburg. Yeah,
Yeah, so there's a whole anti-socialist movement brewing. And I mean, Weimar Germany is a weird era where there actually was quite a bit going for it, at least in the social realm. You had people like Magnus Hirschfeld, who had the Institute of Sexology. And essentially, that institute did tons of research on sexuality, gender, and overall sexual health. They provided counseling and medical services. And they also provided gender affirming care. And there was a lot of studies and a lot of research done about trans people in Weimar, Germany. And it was extremely ahead of its time. I've heard some critiques of his methods, and I'm sure, 100 years ago, I'm sure he wasn't perfect on everything. But he was certainly doing a lot to give people very needed medical care, especially for people who were seen as kind of degenerates beforehand and soon after with the Nazis. And Institute of Sexology was one of the first targets of the Nazis. And the German Student Union looted the institute, and they stole, I've seen estimates of around 12 to 25,000 books, but they essentially stole all that research and just burned it all. And they also burned a bunch of other books that were circulating in Germany at the time. But this is about 14 years of research on transgendered and just sexual and gender health and just study that was just lost, gone, never to be seen again.
Yeah. Generally, in fascist society, in the search of the fifth column, generally look for the most vulnerable within society, which without a doubt, both today and at this time would be, folks who need this sort of gender affirming care, transgender folk and the like. And also book burning is a very characteristic, or just the suppression of books and media in general, what is deemed as degenerate literature.
Right. And some of the books that were banned, just like the general content, would have been like Marxist books or pro LGBTQ plus books, even though that language wasn't around then, but and it would have been a lot of Jewish books, pacifist books, any books on sexuality or sexual education, just anything that the Nazis would have seen as degenerate or
yes.
Yeah. So we'll back up a little bit because that the book burnings I just talked about from the Institute of Sexology was in 1933. This is right after Hitler comes into power. But the way he gets into power, well, first of all, he has this beer hall push.
Yeah, he sees the events happening in Rome and is very much inspired by those. So the March on Rome, I believe, it was like 1922.
Yeah.
So in 23, I'm pretty sure is when he sees that. He's like, "Oh, dude, we should do that here."
Yeah, we should do us a March on Rome.
Yeah, and he gets a bunch of veterans, I believe, to go with him to, where was the beer hall at? Was that in? I think it was like Frankfurt.
It was in Munich.
It was in Munich. Okay.
Yep. It was in Munich. So it's unsuccessful, and Hitler is sent to jail. He's arrested. Mm-hmm. This jail is not the one with bars you think of. You're making liquor in the toilet. Not that type of jail. He's in a pretty cushy environment and certainly not treated like a lot of the other prisoners, and a lot of prisoners are treated today. I mean, he was allowed hundreds of visitors, including like 30 or 40 celebrants of his 35th birthday on 4/20. I heard it described that it was more like a holiday for him. And he got out after 9 months after originally being prosecuted for a 5-year sentence. They're chilling.
Those European jails, man.
Yeah.
I tell you. You ever see a video of like people in like Scandinavia serving a sentence and they're living in like a 1-bedroom apartment?
Right.
It's like supposedly their jail cell.
Except he's in there with like all of his other Nazi buddies, and they're just like, it's just like a Twitter echo chamber, just like an online echo chamber, just like
Bro, you
between like
need-
the worst people that have ever existed.
Two of the dumbest people you know, of course, be going like, exactly. Exactly.
So this is where he writes Mein Kampf. Heard of it?
No. Never.
Look it up.
Never heard of it.
So yeah, he writes Mein Kampf in jail after this attempted coup.
Also, it's funny to note, Mussolini thought Mein Kampf was drivel. He like didn't really care. Like he read it and he was like, "This is boring. Like who cares? Like what is this fucking lowly Gaul even rambling on about? Like this drivel."
I guess that's one thing me and Mussolini have in common, which
Yeah.
I hate to say that.
Didn't really strike the same notes, I guess, to the Italian
Right.
state of mind.
Right. So he gets out. It wasn't a very long sentence. Long enough time to write a 900-page book.
Damn, I think it's drivel too. 900 pages.
He goes on,
You kidding
and he
me?
has no good points.
That's a tomb.
He's got no good points. So eventually, Hindenburg appoints Hitler as chancellor.
Well, before then,
Yes,
we have a lead up of different elections.
we do. Yes,
and particularly the last free and fair election, quote unquote, because particularly before Nazis like fully came into power, there was a lot of leftist anti-fascist sentiment. It is in fact the first instance of Antifa and the anti-fascist Deutsch movement,
which we are now working out of their headquarters.
Yes.
So it's kind of cool to see our roots.
I am getting the Antifa check bi-weekly.
Yeah, George Soros is writing us checks directly.
Direct donor.
Yeah.
Direct to my pocket.
Yeah.
So if that symbolism of the it's, I believe it's a red flag over a black flag or something along those lines. That arises from the socialists and communists within Germany pushing back against like this growing fascist force, and to the point where there are fascists running for government, and then you have the general election in, I believe, 1934 or 33 or sometime in the mid 30s.
Well, he's appointed in 1933.
He
Early
was appointed in 1933. Okay, so I believe the election is in 1932. Because the election is between Adolf Hitler, who a part of the National Socialist German Workers' Party, which is such a mealy mouth way to say we're fascists.
Nazis.
Yeah,
we're Nazis. Yeah.
The Hindenburg, who represents the I want to say the Liberal Party, just kind of like the more centrist, like the good old Germany vote, and Ernst Thälmann, who is under the communist ticket, and very famously, Ernst Thälmann continuously asserts that a vote for Hindenburg is a vote for Hitler because when you scratch a liberal, a fascist bleeds.
Fascist bleeds.
Yeah. And wouldn't you know it, Hindenburg won that general election, and then he's like, I think Hitler kind of knows what he's doing, so gives him the chancellorship. I don't know.
The chancellorship.
Chancellorship. Man, why don't they just have a fucking regular president? You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Like president, prime minister, chancellor. Get over yourself.
Come on.
Fucking blame Otto von Bismarck for that bullshit. I'll tell you that.
Yep.
But
So Hitler is now chancellor. And very soon after, about a month after, there's the Reichstag fire.
Yes,
Um,
which is I believe was blamed on a Dutch communist.
and then used
Quote,
to
unquote.
just blame all communists for.
Yes. It was, I believe that was the real pivotal moment. It basically just like suspended all civil liberties under the Constitution.
Yeah, that would
at
be
that point.
the Reichstag fire decree,
Yes.
which stripped citizens of most civil liberties, including habeas corpus, freedom of expression, freedom of the press, the right of free association and public assembly, and the secrecy of the post and telephone.
And this is, I would say, a pretty good example of what is called a false flag attack. You sometimes hear this in current discourse, particularly from the most insane strata of society, where anything that happens is a false flag. But this is a genuine false flag. Where
That Alex Jones strain of
yeah.
false flaggery.
Yes. Yes. No, this is like a legitimately orchestrated event by the Nazi Party to make it look like it was the Fifth Column doing it.
Yeah, they did it. The Nazis did
which
it.
is 100%
Yeah.
just the Nazis lighting that shit on fire, and the lack of existence of cameras or anything to prove them otherwise. It kind of left it up to them to build the narrative, and of course that's the narrative that they adopted.
Right? It kind of reminds me of the assassination attempt on Trump,
I remember when
Where
that
he-
first happened. Yeah,
Yeah.
I had very similar.
where he blames it directly on Joe Biden.
Yes,
And
yes.
just kind of that sparks a lot of reactionary people to just kind of blame all like the assassination on Democrats, even though it was
It was
a
lunatic.
Republican
It was
dude.
It was that we could honestly maybe do even a whole episode on that kid. That was a bizarre event.
that was odd.
That was, but I remember initially making that analogy as well when it first happened to my girlfriend. But as time went on, I kind of feel like everybody forgot that Trump.
well, because then the
somebody
second one,
yeah, and then, yeah, the second guy, and that dude was even weirder because he was a liberal, but he was like a super pro Ukraine like NAFO weirdo. Like,
yeah,
one of those like the guys that like post the picture, like their profile picture on Twitter is like a Shiba Inu that's like all edited to look like a weird soldier. I don't know, man. Like
something's in the water here.
just some weird shit.
Yeah.
You should keep in that voice crack, by the way.
It's staying in.
In the final.
It's staying in. So right after this Reichstag fire decree, where pretty much all civil liberties are just stripped away,
Yes.
you have no right to privacy, you have no real freedoms at all. Hindenburg, with the increased suppression of the communists after the fire, increased Nazi pressure and pressure from the military and a lot of just more conservative elements, and the belief that Hitler would stabilize Germany, because things are just starting to, it's getting a little out of control for Hindenburg, and he doesn't know how to rein it in, and Hitler's coming in going, I got some ways to rein this in. And so here's a good moment where voting for the lesser of two evils
Didn't pan out.
did not pan out.
It's like the first time that's ever happened.
Right.
It's like it didn't pan out. And then I'm pretty sure when he gave him the chancellorship, Hindenburg like died within like the year. I'm pretty sure. Like I don't know if he was assassinated or if he just straight up was like, okay, well,
I'm out.
I'm out.
Yeah, his body just gave up.
But yeah, he died like very soon after doing that, and then you just kind of stop hearing about him.
Well, he does this right after. Well, he does this as if dying is something he did, which he did.
He did.
But
He's not still around.
So
believe it
he
or not.
dies right after signing the Enabling Act.
Yes.
So with all that pressure from, all those things I just said, thinking Hitler is going to stabilize Germany, he signs this Enabling Act, which essentially makes Hitler the dictator of Germany.
Yes. These mass movements that didn't necessarily come out of nowhere, but seemingly just enveloped the entire nation that it existed within, and increasingly, because a key aspect in fascist ideology being warfare and expansionism and the attaining of quote unquote living space, this like
Lebensraum.
the desire for the frontier, of course, sets us up quite nicely for the sequel to the Great War, the Great War #2.
Number 2.
World War II.
So yeah, pretty much within a few months, Germans go from 100 to 0.
Yes.
Essentially.
Yes.
And about a year after this enabling act, Hitler, to consolidate more power for himself, he essentially orders the killing of about 100. I've heard low estimates of about 100 people, but, estimates up to 200, 300. Essentially, he was killing off what we would call like a left wing of the Nazis, like the Strasserites. They were more anti-capitalist than most Nazis. You would now hear the term like a third position or third positionism.
I would say probably the aspects within the Nazi party that were like, yeah, Hitler's cool, but like I kind of have like my own idea of like how we can take it and spin it. Hitler doesn't necessarily need to be the center of all of it, and Hitler didn't really like that.
Yeah, Hitler did not like that.
Didn't like being the side star. He liked kind of being the main star.
Yeah. So the Strassers gone. And then you have a good amount of Nazis who were gay.
There's a very famous. Do you
Ernst Röhm?
Yeah, Ernst Röhm
is the famous gay Nazi, the token gay, who they could easily point to and go, "This is our gay guy."
We're
and
cool.
then once they're in power, they go, "Yeah, nope, you're gone." So they killed people like Ernst Röhm and other gay Nazis, left-wing Nazis, quote unquote left-wing, because they're more, kind of like a
left wing of the Nazi party.
Socialism for like just like Aryans type thing. Like, you don't
they're
have to.
a unique bunch.
It doesn't have to be straight up fascism. It doesn't have to be communism. Let's meld it into this super racist version of socialism. I guess it doesn't make any sense.
No.
He also killed off some Catholic leaders. Nazis don't really like Catholics. And pretty much just any direct threat to Hitler's power, he kills them off in what is called the Night of Long Knives, which is actually a few nights. It goes from June 30 to July 2nd of 1934. So the Knights of Long Knives. Let's get that S in there. Multiple. Super hard on editing.
Multiple.
So, yeah, 4 years later, do you have any context between this and Night of the Broken Glass?
I would say, increasingly within Nazi society in general, there is definitely this, again, building up of the ideal citizenry versus the fifth column. Of course, you have leftists being antagonized and imprisoned arbitrarily. You have people who, transgender folk or gay folk.
Or Jewish people as well.
But yeah, and then Jewish in particular, you have, of course, the rise in anti-Jewish legislature. They have to identify themselves by wearing the yellow Star of David on their like arm patch, I think, or something like that. And increasingly there's just this sense, it's an aspect within fascist ideology where the undesirables, quote unquote, the fifth column, you need to dehumanize them in order to justify weeding them out. In Italy, there wasn't necessarily that much of a focus on like weeding out the undesirables. Like, as they got friendlier with Nazi Germany, they recognized that there were undesirables in society. But Hitler was like psychotic, and the Nazis were psychotic because they wanted to like industrialized methods of extermination,
right, which
against the Jewish people and other vulnerable aspects within German society.
which I would say the prelude of a lot of that like industrialized killing would be the Night of Broken Glass, which is Kristallnacht.
Yeah, Kristallnacht, which is it starts supposedly because a Polish Jew supposedly killed like some Nazi official, I think in like Paris or not Paris, something like that. That there might not even be any truth to that to begin with. It could have just been like a thing that people just started saying and the media took it and ran with it.
Yeah, as we've seen, the Nazis aren't really
they're not too keen on the facts.
They're okay just kind of saying shit.
They can play around
running with it. Yeah.
And so you have this, it basically state sanctioned lootings and destruction of Jewish businesses.
They destroyed over 7,000 Jewish businesses, synagogues, and buildings.
And generally what like the scenes that you would be seeing are you would have like these foot soldiers, like brown shirts, Nazi police and whatnot, just kind of idly standing by watching the like quote unquote Aryan German citizenry destroying these businesses and not intervening at all. Like they're just letting it happen. And anytime the Jewish shop owner is trying to stop them, that's when the cop feels the need to intervene and be like, whoa, no, let them continue to destroy all your shit. And then we're going to arrest you after all of this is said and done.
It seems very similar to how our police and our fascists here in America tend to interact.
Yes.
If you look at the Capitol insurrection, the cops
they open the gate.
They kind of open the gate.
Or another analogy you could definitely draw is it happens a lot within Palestine and Israel. Like settlers from Israel coming into Palestinian-owned shops and homes and then destroying them or taking control of them, while the Israeli military stands by, guns pointed at the Palestinians for trying to, defend their homes from being looted and taken over.
And it reminds me of a lot of like post-Reconstruction era, like the Black Wall Street, like destructions that white people were just like really upset that these Black Wall Streets were starting to form and black people were starting to kind of do their own capitalism, and they just went in and destroyed everything. But so during the Night of Broken Glass, about 30,000 Jewish men were arrested and put in concentration camps. So I've kind of seen some descriptions talking about it being somewhat of a prelude to the final solution.
Yes.
And a lot of the prelude to the final solution, I would also put to like deportations of Jewish people.
And a huge aspect in the dehumanizing of Jews within German society is rounding them up into what are called ghettos, Jewish ghettos, where they're
the Warsaw Ghetto.
Yes, like the Warsaw Ghetto. But even before they were expanding into like Poland in a military sense, like within Germany, they would take whatever Jewish population existed within a city and then round them up to like just the most derelict, like just kind of like really rough part of town that nobody really wants to live in. So
like a proto redlining?
Well, yeah. I mean, they are called ghettos. We did the usage of words and vocabulary. Like they're definitely borrowing for a reason.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard not to draw some of these lines between a lot of what the Nazis did. And I mean, the Nazis themselves would draw the lines from them to America. And, like we'll talk about with Lebensraum, which is actually our next subject. So we might as well jump into it. Lebensraum meaning living space, similar to that Italian idea.
Spazio Vitale. Yeah.
Yes.
Probably saying it wrong.
Yeah. But
I'm not Italian. So
Hitler and the Nazis were very open with the fact that they were directly inspired by places like England, France, and especially America with Manifest Destiny.
Yes. I think for to understand the German context, it should be noted that throughout like the 19th century, before Germany was a unified state, whenever there were some hard times, particularly around like the revolutions of 1848 and prior, like during the Napoleonic Wars, there were a lot of like German immigrants that would leave not only to go to America, but they would also go to different places within Europe. So you have a lot of Germans moving into like the Volga River area, which is this like major river within Russia. There's a very sizable German population within Russia at that time that had been there at least since the 1880s. You also have Germans living within a lot of Poland, because Poland, as it was drawn up before World War II, comprised a lot of what used to be Prussia. So of course there's a ton of Germans still living within like particularly northern Poland. And as well, I mean, of course you have Austria just south of them, but in what is today the Czech Republic, then known as Czechoslovakia, you had a lot of Germans living within kind of the mountainous edge outside of the Czechoslovakia, which during the time of the Holy Roman Empire used to be referred to as the Kingdom of Bohemia. A lot of Germans living within there. And over time, as Germany is like, they basically have like this idea that like, okay, we're just going to hit up every German like place where German nationals live. And we're going to be like, all right, so either you're joining our country or you're joining our country with a gun drawn to your head.
Right.
You don't really have a choice in this
Right.
matter. So through like legal, going through the legal process, they're able to annex Austria just through a very almost comical vote where they give everybody a ballot that's like, hey, Germany's taken over and Hitler's going to be your new chancellor. Is that cool or what? And there's only like one option that says yes.
Yeah.
And that's the ballot that you get. And
you hand your crush a note that's like, will you go out with me? And the only box to check is yes.
Yeah, there's 2 yes boxes.
There's 2 yes boxes.
And then you have Germany hitting up Czechoslovakia being like, hey, give us, it's called the Sudetenland, I believe. And they're like, okay, fine, we'll do it, I guess. And yeah, it's these series of compromise treaties happening because Germany is really vying for expansion by any means necessary, and of course that comes to a head. Now, before they get into invading Poland, there's a very famous pact that happens between the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany. Called the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, I believe is what it's called.
Yeah, I think so.
I believe is the name of that guy. Essentially, that pact is a lot of the time brought up. Is it Ribbentrop? Yeah. That pact is brought up a lot of the time to be like, oh, the Nazis and the Soviets were like going to work together. Like they're just going to split Poland in half because they hate the Polish people and they like. But in reality, like, the Soviet Union and particularly while it was under the leadership of Stalin, he kept hitting up like every Western power, like France and Great Britain, being like, hey guys, Germany is like really like they're serious about this shit. We should do something about it. You know what I mean? Like you want to like tag team, like try and nip it in the bud, you know? And every time they were like, no, like at this time in the UK, particularly, they had his name was I forget his first name, but Mr. Chamberlain.
Mm-hmm.
He was the prime minister, the predecessor.
Neville?
Yes, Neville Chamberlain, predecessor to Winston Churchill, whose legacy is kind of tarnished because he's just like kind of a wimp.
Yeah.
He kind of
just a spineless.
He kind of just lets Hitler walk all over him, and Stalin is like, yeah, Hitler's just gonna keep walking all over you. We should like kind of do something about that. And he keeps going like, no, we're gonna give him the Sudetenland and just kind of hope that he stops there. And of course he doesn't stop there. He wants Poland, and so Stalin is trying to like figure out, okay, well, how can I do this without having the Soviet Union get caught in the crossfire. But of course, that doesn't end up matter.
Yeah.
Matter. It doesn't matter in the end because, of course, they get invaded by Germany as well.
Of course. Yeah. I do have a quote here from Hitler just talking about, because that's all really good insight about what's going on. And Hitler's idea of Lebensraum, again, tongue twisters, really, it kind of, the way he talks about it really ties into the idea of like social Darwinism, like we talked about. And so here's this quote here. He's saying this at a speech at the annual rally of young officer cadets at the Berlin Sportspalast. This is in 1940. He says...
So this is about a year into invasion. They've already invaded Poland by this time, which I believe was in September of 1939.
Yes.
Started.
He says... Truly, this earth is a trophy cup for the industrious man, and this rightly so, in the service of natural selection. He says it. He who does not possess the force to secure his Lebensraum in this world, and if necessary to enlarge it, does not deserve to possess the necessities of life. He must step aside and allow stronger peoples to pass him by. So he very much sees this expansionism as... You just have to be stronger than everyone else, and if you're not, get the fuck out of the way.
Yeah.
Just back off.
It's a very animalistic kind of like survival of the fittest way of interpreting society.
Right. And he talks a lot about like being autocratic, which you hear that a lot with Donald Trump today, that we need to be self-sufficient. Mm-hmm. And of course, Trump is just saying that, I think. I mean, I don't think he wants to stop international trade. And
no.
I think that very much helps capitalists. And I think...
No, it just gets the Midwest slugs like start clapping and cheering.
He's going to bring our jobs back.
Yeah. It's like, no, he's one of the guys who got rid of him in the first place.
Right. But Hitler sees this as, you have to be able to be self-sufficient before you can start expanding. And so you can be self-sufficient, and then you start just gathering more land and more resources and just start...
He really did not live by his own code, like did not become self-sufficient, entirely sufficient on expansion, or entirely reliant on expansion.
Certainly not.
In order to maintain one's way of living.
Certainly not. So with, increasing expansionism and all of that, I mean, we all know where this ends. I mean, I don't think we have to really cover this too much where all of
World
this
War
goes.
II. We're not
so you've heard of the final...
You want to listen to a podcast on World War II? There's countless to pick from.
There's countless. We know this ends with the final solution.
Right.
6 million Jews are killed in extermination camps. It is absolutely horrific,
horrible,
disgusting. And so I think, and I just want to touch on what I was saying earlier about drawing some lines, I think, between America and Germany, because it does make me think, the Nazis are they're forcing Jews into these ghettos, right? Mm-hmm. And we see that a lot in American history, especially with redlining, of not allowing black people to buy property in certain areas and kind of pushing them into areas that they can then put, factories in and totally ruin that air and, pave a highway right through, and just kind of these areas where they could give less of a fuck about and really just leave them to die. So we see that a lot in American history. And also we see with these concentration camps, a lot of these discontents, right? They're considered undesirable in society.
Yes.
And it makes me think about, Jim Crow era. And it makes me think, after the Emancipation Proclamation. After that, I mean, it says slavery is illegal, unless they are prisoners. So up until today, we put all of our undesirables in prison to this day. And in Nazi Germany, they were forced to work, create commodities. They made a lot of fucking money for Germans. And what do you think prisoners do in America? They make a lot of commodities and a lot of fucking money.
And I mean, the analogies could definitely be drawn. There are certainly other aspects of concentration of, again, people that are dehumanized by the larger sphere of society. I think increasingly in modern America, just referring back to this latest election cycle, the stoking of fear, particularly amongst like immigrants, immigrant communities kind of being seen as like this outside threat, this outside invader. Particularly, of course, I think about like Haitian immigrants, just how completely dehumanizing like a lot of the narrative surrounding them is, and just kind of, like in a way like justifying our treatment of them. I mean, it was under the Biden administration that you saw those pictures of like Texas like Rangers like rounding up Haitians on horseback with like just some really dehumanizing shit happening. You could you draw a lot of parallel. I mean, and amongst right-wing you know, organizing and political movements in general, the like trans people and
definitely
just any vulnerable strata in society,
like women. I mean, I think
well.
like I think part of it is
just
misogyny and transphobia and anti-immigrant sentiments are somewhat acceptable in polite society, unfortunately.
Yes.
It's, you know, if your plumber shows up and he starts going on about, you know,
the old ball and
these
chain
immigrants or this old ball and chain or whatever, I mean, you're not gonna plumb your own toilet. You know, you probably let that guy in and just let him do his thing and get him the fuck out. You know, it's still somewhat acceptable, and I think fascist movements they find those little things. Like we'll talk about George Lincoln Rockwell, and I'm not gonna talk a whole lot about it, but at a certain point, he decided talking about Jews in America is not doing it. Let me talk about black people.
Yeah.
And so he kind of put away the swastikas, and, you know, he dressed himself up nicer, and he ran for, I think, governor. And it was kind of working.
Yeah.
Because they know they are just going to throw spaghetti at a wall, see what sticks, and go, that's what I'm going to attack, you know?
That's what we'll tack on.
You know, I think we don't need a World War II overview.
No.
I think you can.
Guess what? We won.
We won.
Yo, hey, everybody, knock on your neighbor's door, scream it from the window. War's over.
War's over, and then the Cold War ensues. That is a whole other. That's a whole other thing. I do want to quickly talk about the America First Committee.
Yes.
Just during World War II, you had a lot of mostly kind of rich, corporate, bourgeois kind of people like Henry Ford, promoting this isolationism, trying to keep us out of the war. And certainly Henry Ford had a lot in common with Hitler. And he was given one of the highest awards you can get as a non-German. That's a story for another day when we talk about Henry Ford exclusively.
Yes. There was a lot of very sympathetic Americans to the German and
Italians.
And Italians.
Mussolini was on the Time magazine. I think he was like Great Man of the Year or some shit.
And
right?
Hitler.
And Hitler.
And Hitler, both of them. Yeah.
These are people that we act like coming out of World War II, like we're just, it's just, there's no gray area. We're the good guys.
Yeah. I mean,
they're the bad guys. But there's so much more gray area of, I mean, we'll talk about the German American Bund. We'll talk about, you know, the silver shirts. We'll talk about all these movements going on during World War II and post World War II that are carrying on the legacy of people like Hitler and Mussolini, yet we still have this narrative like we routed out fascism completely with that war and we are done. Communists are a problem now.
Yes.
We need to move on, and that's that.
Again, that sympathetic strata came from people who were like, okay, well, I don't want a communist revolution. I still really like capitalism. And it wasn't really until like they became super war driven and expansionist that like the quote unquote polite strata of society, the liberals, were like, okay, maybe these guys are they're doing a little too much, you know?
Well, they were okay with a lot of it until it got turned on them.
Yes.
And then they started just like, oh no, come on.
Yeah.
Us? You're going to do this to us?
I do have a few figures to talk about in regards to that ideology in the next episode. But I think that probably does it.
Yeah,
for
we'll
this
wrap
one,
it
would
up
you
here.
say?
I'm
Any
finding
other-
myself getting pretty worked up here. Something about talking about Nazis and fascists they make my blood boil, as you hear in the intro. Except we're mad about very different things.
They grind my gears, as Peter Griffin of Family Guy fame would say. Grind my gears.
God.
Tom, do you have any final little notes, little
This is
trinkets?
Don't Be a Sucker. We are the podcast, the one-stop shop for all your fascist history.
I thought you were going to say fascist needs. And I was
No,
like,
no, definitely not.
Not that.
We are your one-stop shop. This is Tom.
And this is Tom. And rate good reviews on this podcast, wherever you're listening to it. We still haven't figured out where that's going to be.
But we will. Goodbye.
Sucker.